There's only one room left, my boss said, not even looking up from his phone. I froze. After a 12-hour drive through pouring rain, my feet ached, my head throbbed, and all I wanted was sleep. The hotel lobby smelled like old coffee and exhaustion. Every other guest had already checked in. No vacancies. No alternatives. I forced a small smile and replied quietly, "Then I'll sleep on the sofa?" That was the moment he finally looked at me. Ethan Cross, my boss, the powerful, emotionally distant CEO everyone feared. The man who never missed a detail in business meetings but somehow missed the human ones. His eyes flickered with surprise, maybe even guilt, before he masked it with indifference. "You don't have to," he said flatly. "It's fine," I answered. And I meant it. I'd learned long ago that kindness often meant discomfort. Growing up, my mother used to give our only meal to neighbors who needed it more. "We'll manage," she'd say. Somehow we always did. The sofa in his suite was stiff and short, but I folded my coat into a pillow and lay down without complaint. As the lights dimmed, I heard him pacing the room. Silence stretched between us, heavy, awkward, honest. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered how someone so successful could feel so alone. And I wondered if my small act, choosing the sofa without resentment, might quietly remind him of something he'd forgotten. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness isn't loud. It's simply choosing not to take more than you need. And I had no idea that decision would change everything. I barely slept. The sofa creaked every time I shifted, and the city lights outside the window kept flickering like unfinished thoughts. Somewhere near dawn, I heard Ethan stop pacing. The bedroom door remained open, a thin line of light spilling onto the carpet, like an unspoken invitation I knew better than to accept. Morning arrived quietly. I sat up, smoothing my clothes, pretending discomfort didn't exist. That's when I noticed him standing by the window, tie loosened, staring out at the city as if it held answers he'd misplaced. "You could have taken the bed," he said suddenly, his voice lower than usual. Not commanding. Almost unsure. I smiled faintly. "You had a long day too." He turned toward me, studying my face like a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Most people don't do things like that," he said. "Do what?" "Give up comfort, without expecting something back." I shrugged. Not everything's a transaction. That seemed to hit him harder than any accusation ever could. During breakfast downstairs, he was quieter than usual. No emails. No calls. Just silence, and that silence spoke volumes. When the waiter brought my coffee, Ethan thanked him. I'd worked for him 2 years and had never heard those words leave his mouth. On the drive to the conference, he finally spoke. "My wife used to say the same thing," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "That not everything had to be earned." My heart tightened. I hadn't known he'd been married. "She died," he added simply. "Cancer. 3 years ago. Since then, I focused on work. It was easier than feeling." I didn't interrupt. Some truths need space. At the conference, everything went wrong. The main presentation crashed minutes before Ethan was set to speak. Panic spread like wildfire. Executives whispered. Investors frowned. I leaned toward him and whispered, "You know this better than the slides. Talk to them." He hesitated, then stood up. And as he spoke confidently, vulnerably, I saw something shift. Not just in the room. But the applause was real. Not polite. Not forced. Real. As Ethan stepped down from the stage, something in his posture had changed. His shoulders were still broad, still confident, but the rigid armor he wore so carefully had begun to crack. Back in the car, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "I forgot I could do that," he said quietly. "Do what?" I asked. "Be myself." The words stayed with me as we drove. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't open his laptop. Instead, he asked about me. Not my schedule. Not my tasks. My life. So I told him, about my mother, about growing up counting coins, about learning early that kindness was the only thing that multiplied when you gave it away. I told him I took the assistant job not for status, but stability. He listened. Truly listened. That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, the hotel manager called. "A room just opened up," she said cheerfully. "We can move one of you." I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. "You should take it," he said immediately. I shook my head. "I'm okay. The sofa survived one night." He smiled faintly, but there was sadness in it. "You know, she used to do that too. Put everyone else first." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from his board. They wanted aggressive layoffs to boost profits before the next quarter. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Then he did something I never expected. He handed me the phone. "What would you do?" he asked. I hesitated. "I'd find another way. People aren't numbers. They're families. Stories." Silence again, but this time, it felt hopeful. That night, he took the sofa. "No," I protested. "You've reminded me of something," he said gently. "It's my turn." As I lay in the bed, I realized kindness doesn't just change situations. It changes people. And the biggest changes often begin with the smallest choices. I woke up to the smell of coffee. For a second I panicked, thinking I'd overslept, missed emails, failed in some invisible way. Then I remembered. The bed. The quiet. The fact that, for once, I wasn't the one sacrificing sleep. When I stepped into the living area, Ethan was there, still in yesterday's shirt, eyes tired but clear. He handed me a cup without a word. "Did you sleep?" I asked. He nodded. "Better than I have in years." On the drive to the office that morning, the city looked different, brighter, softer, like it was holding its breath. The board meeting was tense. Numbers filled the screen. Layoffs were framed as necessary adjustments. Ethan stood up. "I won't do it," he said calmly. The room went silent. "We can restructure without cutting people. Reduce executive bonuses. Pause expansion. If we survive by breaking the very people who built this company, then we don't deserve to survive at all." Faces hardened. A few scoffed. But others, quiet ones, nodded. Later that afternoon, an email went out company-wide. No layoffs. Temporary sacrifices at the top. Relief poured in from every department. Messages. Tears. Gratitude. In the elevator, Ethan turned to me. "You know," he said, "I thought success was about control. About never needing anyone." He smiled, real this time. Turns out I was wrong. That evening, as we packed to leave, the hotel receptionist smiled at us. "2 rooms available tonight," she said. Ethan glanced at me, then shook his head. "We're checking out." Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt clean, like something heavy had finally lifted. I realized then that kindness doesn't just soften hearts. It builds courage. And when courage meets compassion, lives change, not just one, but many. Months later, I found myself standing in a very different office. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. Laughter echoed down the hallway. Real laughter, not the kind people force when the boss walks by. The company was thriving, not because of fear or pressure, but because people felt seen. Ethan stood beside me, watching the team celebrate a successful launch. "Funny thing," he said softly. "Profits went up after we chose people." I smiled. "Turns out kindness is good business." He nodded, then grew thoughtful. "That night at the hotel, when you chose the sofa, I thought you were just being polite. But you reminded me of who I used to be. Of who she believed I could be." There was no sadness in his voice this time. Just gratitude. A week later, he announced a new program: housing support for employees in crisis, extended medical coverage, paid time off for caregivers. No press release. No applause. Just action. As for me, I was offered a promotion. Not because I demanded it. Not because I expected anything in return. But because kindness has a way of coming back, quietly. On my last day as his assistant, Ethan handed me a small card. Inside, he'd written, "You taught me that leadership isn't about having the best room. It's about making sure no one feels left out in the cold." I still carry that card. Because in the end, it was never about the bed or the sofa. It was about choosing humanity when no one was watching. And I learned something too. Sometimes, the smallest sacrifice opens the door to the biggest change. There was only one room left that night.